Alright, hi everyone, my name's Pete and I'm a content specialist here at Coast Digital. Today I'll be talking to you about the building blocks of content marketing strategy and how we overcome some of the inherent challenges presented by content. There will be time for questions at the end, so if you do have any questions or any points you'd like me to discuss further, please submit your question and I'll tackle as many as I can in the Q&A. Okay, so I'm going to start in a slightly cliched fashion with a quick definition of content marketing. Rather than just talk about how we see content marketing, I thought I'd present this great quote from the Content Marketing Institute. They say that content marketing is creating and distributing relevant and valuable content to attract and acquire and engage a clearly defined and understood target audience, with the objective of driving profitable customer action. And as you'll see from this webinar, this matches pretty closely with our view of content marketing. We see it as a strategic marketing method that delivers measurable and valuable results. Now, with that definition in mind, I'm going to start by saying that content is hard, but it's relatively simple to understand the challenge it presents. Poor quality content doesn't drive results, which means you need to put the time and resource into making sure your content is the best it can be. Ultimately, for it to be worth your time, it needs to be done well. If you aren't stringent with your quality control and produce poor quality content, which you then go on to promote, then when your target audience consumes that content, they'll be left with a negative opinion of your brand. So that's why we believe it's important to take a strategic approach to all elements of content marketing. To achieve a high quality output from inception to delivery, you need to take a strategic approach to all the elements of content marketing. In this webinar, I'm going to talk about the groundwork you need to do, the practical and technical considerations that you need to take into account, how to generate ideas, and then how to build out your promotional strategy. I'll also talk about how all of this comes together to formulate our approach to content marketing. And then there'll be a Q&A at the end, as I said. So firstly, I'm going to talk about what goes into creating a content marketing campaign. And I'm going to break this down into 3 sections, which will be research, creation and implementation, and then promotion. So the first thing we need to talk about is research. Research provides us with the groundwork for our strategy, and it allows us to make informed decisions that improve our chances of success. In this section, I'll talk about the kinds of research you need to do and why data is important. So research, I think, is a vital first step towards content marketing success. Coast Digital, we base all of our marketing on research, both qualitative research and quantitative. Research helps us to move away from assumptions and personal beliefs. Instead, we can make decisions based on data and facts. As I mentioned previously, content marketing requires considerable resource investment, and this means the cost of failure is a high risk. This makes research all the more imperative. We can't afford to have our content marketing campaign fail, simply because we based our strategy upon an opinion or a personal bias. Instead, we need to make decisions that come from an informed position. So let's dig into some of the kinds of research we do and how it helps. User research is a great place to start because content can only succeed when it's right for our target audience. So to that end, you need to find out as much as possible about your users. You want to be able to answer these kinds of questions. What's relevant to your users? What kinds of content do they consume? What devices do they use? What do they want to hear? And finally, what are they to you? And what I mean by that is, where are they in the buying cycle? Are they first-time buyers, repeat customers, lapsed subscribers? And if you can answer these questions, then you have a good understanding of your users, and that should allow you to create content that they'll want and find interesting. It can also help to inform your promotional strategy, help to steer towards or away from certain marketing channels or methods. So as I mentioned before, user research helps to break you out of those personal biases or internal patterns. Those moments when you say, oh, but we've always done it that way. This kind of response needs to be overridden by the question, is this what users want? The idea of sticking with what you've always done is a problem we often come across. Many businesses focus far too much on what they want to say, not enough on what their audience wants to hear. However, marketing is ultimately about making your business more successful. So while it's important that you take a long look at your users' needs and requirements, it doesn't mean internal factors can be ignored. Looking at the areas of your business that need a boost, or areas that are really well suited to content, is a good place to start. Interviews with internal stakeholders, assessments of which parts of your website are short on content. There's lots of really good ways to get an internal steer on what you need to do from a content marketing perspective. You just need to make sure that when you then go on to create that content, it's created with your users in mind. So let's dig into some specifics, the ways we conduct research. Please note this isn't an exhaustive or exclusive list, just some examples of how we use methods and tools and what we'd be looking to get from them. And in this example I'm talking about this from a content marketing perspective, but the kind of data and insight you can get from these kinds of research are useful for other marketing approaches as well. So the first thing to look at is what I call raw data. By this I mean looking at, for example, your website analytics to determine things like the percentage of users using each device type, pages on the site that get high engagement, pages on the site that get low engagement, pages on the site receiving a high number of backlinks, any indicator that can give you a steer in terms of what your content should look like. Whether it's telling you something about medium or topic, it's going to be useful. If your website does have an internal search function, then analytics should allow you to see a record of all the all the searches performed. And this can be a great way to generate ideas for content, as this represents the things users want but haven't been able to find. The second thing to do is actually take the time to talk to your users. If you want to know what kind of content your users are looking for, then why not ask them? Surveys can give you a great statistical steer in terms of the kinds of worries your users have, and actual telephone interviews allow you to run through a script that hits specific questions useful to your content production. For example, before you bought our product, did you understand about all of its features? In the end, this gives us both quantitative data, and by that I mean hard statistics. For example, the percentage of your users that are on mobile, what percentage of your users are female, what's the average dwell time on your information-heavy pages, and qualitative data, opinions. For example, I didn't feel like I knew enough to make my first purchase, or I don't know what to buy next. Both these things are great for content marketing. Quantitative data can feed into our strategy around medium and promotion, while qualitative data can inform tone and topic. So before we move on, I'm just going to very quickly recap what we've covered in this section. So firstly, research can help us move away from our own opinions and biases and towards an approach based on data and facts. Secondly, user research is vital. After all, we want our users to consume the content and find it valuable. Thirdly, while our users do need to be the focus, we also need to factor in internal requirements. We need to think about where content marketing can help us reach our overall business objectives. And finally, your research approach should give you both qualitative and quantitative data, and we need to understand how both of those are important. So as we move on to content creation and promotion, it's important to remember that every part of our strategy needs to be informed by our research. So with the idea of research fresh in our minds, let's continue. So next I'm going to talk about creating and implementing your content. Creation and implementation are both important. These could easily be separate sections, but I think they're so intrinsically linked they need to be looked at together. So the first thing I'm going to say is that what you can do is just as important as what you want to do. You may have a great idea for a piece of content. You may have an idea that's definitely going to resonate with your target audience. You may have a well thought out promotion strategy to match. But if you don't have the ability to implement that content, then it's all for nothing. What do I mean by this? Well, here's 3 examples to kind of illustrate that point. You may want to create, for the first one, you may want to create a series of beginner's guides videos, but you don't have the ability to create high quality video or graphics, or an understanding of the basic do's and don'ts when it comes to video production. You may want to create a second, for a second example, you may want to create a content hub where users can submit questions that you can then turn into content, but you don't have an area of your website well suited to fill in this role. For the third example, you may want to create an infographic explaining how your products work together to encourage existing customers to make more purchases, but you don't have any in-house design resource to create something of the necessary standard to stand out from the crowd. Alongside these kinds of technical limitations, you also need to consider practical limitations, the most common being time and budget. All these factors need to be considered when you decide what kind of content you're going to produce and the strategy around it. So with those limitations in mind, it's time to think about the medium and topic of our content. I've talked a lot about research already, but this is where we really start putting it into practice. Your content needs to respond to the implications of your research. Otherwise you're going to end up creating something that, no matter how good it may be, simply isn't right for your users. That could mean a number of things, from failing to answer the questions they actually want answers to putting it into a medium they simply aren't going to consume. So what kind of things should we be looking out for? Well, there are general implications. For example, that 80% of your traffic is on mobile, or that your users shun Facebook in favor of Twitter, or that your target audience don't have time to read and would much rather see a short video. These kind of things can give you a strong steer on things like medium, length, and where to promote your content. But there are also specific implications. For example, that prospects need additional points of engagement to be warmed up for their first conversion, or the customers need further education to help them know what to buy next. These kind of things can help you work out big things like the topic of your content, or may simply become a specific insight that goes into that content. It's not always about the big things, it's not always about the title, or the big design. Sometimes the thing that wins the customer over for you is that really specific little piece of information that you've drawn out of your research and turned into a really valuable piece of insight within that content. So with all this in mind, you can start tailoring your content to meet the needs and requirements you've discovered. So I'm just going to present a quick example, both to illustrate how research findings can stack up to inform our approach, and also demonstrating that you can come to the wrong conclusion if you don't have all the information. So let's have a look at an example. So let's say our research has shown us the following. Number one, first-time customers need more education about the product. Number two, the majority of our traffic is coming from mobile. Number three, our audience is extremely time poor. And finally, number four, our audience prefers to read rather than watch a video. So let's look at how our understanding of the kind of content we should be creating changes as we add in more and more of this information. So point one, I immediately suggest a beginner's guide. So it's a good piece of content to offer people who need that first piece of education, who need to understand why the product might be good for them. Point two, it's already probably leading us towards the idea that video is the right option. Video is a really good style of content to give to mobile users. Point three, reinforce this idea. Video delivers high quality information in a short period of time. However, point four then shows that video isn't right for our audience. This could be for a number of reasons. Perhaps they're consuming this content during work hours and they worry how video will be perceived by co-workers, or they're consuming the content during a commute and they prefer to read rather than struggle to stream and listen to a video. So where does this leave us? Well, knowing the nature of mobile devices, we want to steer away from heavy blocks of text that might be off-putting for users. Equally, while video is ruled out, that doesn't mean we can't use imagery. Imagery is another great way of delivering lots of information without overwhelming the user with a wall of text. And while all of this is important, we need to remember this isn't the complete picture. Now we need to start considering those practical limitations. We need to ask questions like, do we have somewhere on the website well suited to housing this content? In this specific example, a great question might be, is our website mobile friendly? If it's not, then what are our options? User research will go a long way to helping you determine the type, format, and style of your content. In the example given, we're looking at short, mobile-friendly, written content with an attention to engaging and informative imagery and visual aids. Your research may also present you with a clear topic. In the prior example, there was a strong suggestion that we should be producing a beginner's guide. But even in this case, this idea still needs some fleshing out. As I mentioned before, quality is a major concern. We need to create something that adds value for the user. So how do we go beyond just creating a beginner's guide? How do we create something truly valuable? We do that by adding more quality ideas. We do that by adding more quality insight, knowledge, and expertise. It's also important to note that in many cases, your research won't give you a neatly packaged, complete content idea. In these cases, you'll need to do more idea generation work. Your research becomes a framework around which you create those ideas. It needs to be right for the users, but sometimes that user information doesn't give you the complete picture. Alongside all of this is the ever-present concern of what your competitors are doing. You need to make sure you're putting out something new and interesting into the marketplace. You don't want to blend into the background noise. And finally, you need to remember that your content won't exist in a vacuum. You need to create supporting content such as landing pages, ad messaging, blog articles, infographics, etc. All of this stuff that you need to help promote your sort of flagship content more effectively. It all works to engage your target audience, and all of this means coming up with more quality ideas. So let's talk about some ways we can generate those ideas. So the first two that I'm going to talk about is basing your ideas on specific needs and feedback from users from your user research. So that might be specific questions like we talked about earlier, like not knowing enough about the product. And secondly, your entries into site search. As I mentioned, your analytics should be able to show you what people are searching for, suggest that they can't find it on the website. So thirdly, I'm going to talk about organic search. So when we're looking at search queries for content inspiration, your large volume terms probably won't give very much away. While digital marketing is obviously a really important term for Coast Digital, that doesn't immediately fill my mind with specific ideas for content that our users might be looking for. That's why instead we look at long-tail search queries. What I mean by that are longer, more specific searches made by users who are looking for a particular piece of information or an answer to a particular question. Now this data can be hard to come by. In our experience, you'll probably need an active PPC account to get access to this information. However, it can give some really good inspiration. Searches like, how do I create a digital marketing strategy? How important is SEO in 2017? Or how do I make content marketing work? You know, these give us a much clearer and more fully formed picture of what those users are looking for. So next you have social media. There's several ways you can use social media to help you generate content ideas. You can use it as another way to go out to your user base. You know, you ask them the question, what content would you find useful? Or what questions do you wish we'd answer? Going out with these kind of requests to certain audiences on social media can be a risky proposition, but it only takes a few good quality replies to give you the steer that you need. Another approach is a more passive one. And what I mean by this is looking at your social media profiles. What kinds of posts get the most engagement? Which ones get no engagement at all? If you're getting comments and replies from users, what kind of things are they asking or commenting on? All this can help you form a picture of what will and won't be received well by your target audience. You should also take the opportunity to make use of internal resources. For example, there are people in your business who speak to customers regularly. You know, if you have a sales team, then your sales team may have thoughts about the kinds of questions and problems that your customers want addressed. You know, and if you do your job well and you create a piece of content that addresses those problems, then you're making your sales team's job easier because they won't have to answer them anymore. So, you know, it's a win-win for everyone. And in that way, it's really good to get those people involved because, you know, they see the benefit of what you're doing from a marketing perspective. So the final method I'd like to talk about is what I'm going to call content exploration. And what I mean by this is going out and finding the content that's already performing well in your area, talking to your target audience and making a good job of it. Now you can do this manually, but there are downsides to this. So firstly, you're going to find the content that performs well organically. You know, the content where the SEO is good. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the best content out there. You know, number two, you'll find content that's being paid for. You know, that's great. It shows you the kind of promotional strategies your competitors and other people in your field are using. But just because someone's paid to promote a piece of content doesn't mean it's the best content out there. And finally, number three, you'll be relying on your own opinion. How do you respond to that content? That'll become the way you measure it. You're relying on your own bias again. So thankfully, there are tools that can make this an easier task. Tools like BuzzSumo and Ahrefs have content explorers built in. These allow you to search for a particular topic or subject area and then serve up the most shared or most engaged with content over a particular time frame. You'll still need to do a degree of quality management yourself, but some of the potential for bias is removed by the stats these platforms serve up. Things like social shares and backlinks are reasonably good indicators that content is being well received. So let's recap creation and implementation. So in this section I started off by talking about the importance of understanding the kinds of content you've set up to create and implement. You want to avoid going through the research and planning for a piece of content that you can't actually then put into action. Secondly, we looked at how your research should inform the content you create, how important it is to have all the facts when you're building out your medium and your topic of your content. Finally, the focus moved on to idea generation, how we come up with the concepts that are going to make our content engaging, useful and valuable for users. So getting your research right and then taking a measured approach to both production and implementation are both obviously vital. But all of that isn't really worth very much if your target audience never sees what you've created. In this section I'll look at how you build the foundation of an effective promotional strategy to make sure your content gets in front of the right people. So the first thing to know when it comes to promoting content is this. If you want to get your content in front of your target audience, you need to be in the right place at the right time. For some marketing channels, your research will tell you what to do and what to avoid. For example, if you know your audience prefers a particular social network, then it makes sense to prioritize that one over the others. Other services will help you find your target audience wherever they are online. Programmatic display, for example, learns about your audience and finds new places to reach them, which means you can drive your content out to more of the right people in more places across the internet. This style of promotion can actually become research in itself because it gives you vital information about where your audience is and the kind of sites they're using. So when you're looking at planning a promotional strategy, it's also worth looking at what you're already doing. If you have successful marketing campaigns, for example in PPC or display, then taking what works there and applying it to your content promotion makes sense. You know, if you already know what works for your brand on social media when you're promoting you know, other kinds of material, then applying that knowledge to your social strategy for your content gives you a great place to start. However, content marketing also allows you to revisit strategies that have underperformed in the past. For example, if you had a campaign that generated lots of traffic but not many conversions, The hard sell may have been what was putting some prospects off. By taking a softer approach, by serving them up with high quality content and a soft conversion, like an email sign up, you might see better results. So as content marketing continues to evolve, we're seeing more and more styles of advertising where content is the ad. You can see this with native content, Facebook Canvas, and video display, which are all great ways of getting your content in front of an engaged prospect quicker and in a format that suits them where they are at the time. So native content is a promotion method whereby your content lives on other websites. It's kind of an evolution of the advertorial sponsored article style of promotion, but it involves seeding out your content in much the same way as a display ad, which means showing the content to relevant prospects on sites that they frequent and in situations where they're going to be most likely to click. Native content also allows you to include a form for, say, email sign-up or lead capture within that content. So it means you're moving away from driving them out to a landing page to convert them, and you can kind of convert them mid-browse while they're still reading the content. So then you've got Facebook Canvas, which is the latest addition to Facebook's advertising portfolio. You may have already seen this ad style. It's a very sort of mobile-friendly style of advertising where you can tap to expand the ad, and it takes you to kind of a microsite that sits within Facebook. You can include video, imagery, and written content that the user can then manipulate by tapping, swiping, and rotating their phone. And it's great because it means they don't have to leave the Facebook experience to consume what you want them to see. And again, you can include mechanisms to convert them where they already are, so you're not requiring them to click out and do something else. You kind of capture them while they're still in the middle of what they were doing before, so it's not too interruptive. And then finally, you've got video display. So this allows you to deliver video content instead of static banners. So this gives you the opportunity to put something more engaging out onto the display market. Rather than a static banner that might blend into the background, you can put a really engaging video that's going to capture that person's eye and sort of draw them away from what they're doing. So these promotional methods are where taking the time to create really high quality content really pays off. Rather than having to rely on the user clicking on an ad and then going to your content, this style puts your content in front of them straight away. And it goes without saying, subpar content here is really going to hurt you because essentially you're putting it right in front of them, and if it's not up to scratch, they're going to see it, and it's going to leave them with a bad impression of your brand. But if you've done your research and you've put in the hard work, this is a great way to make the most of it. So in our experience, the best way to amplify content and use it to achieve your marketing objectives, whether that's lead generation, brand awareness, or re-engagement, is through a multi-channel marketing campaign. And what I mean by this is a campaign making use of multiple marketing approaches. For example, going out on paid search, email, social media, display, and native content concurrently. There are several reasons why we've seen this strategy be successful. Firstly, each channel approach has a different strength. So while a segmented email campaign is a great way to put a tailored message in front of a specific part of your target audience, a programmatic display campaign allows you to put that message in front of as many people at the right time as possible. So both of these things are great. They both have their strengths and they're both good for your business. So why pick between them? You can run both and other channels at the same time, all as part of one multi-channel campaign. So now imagine you're running these two approaches or even more. It's all driving to the same piece of content. You're worried the same user might see the same message twice, right? So that brings me to my second point. That's not a bad thing. Research has shown that your average consumer requires 9 interactions or touch points with a brand before they're going to make a purchase. Now, content marketing allows us to aim for a softer conversion, so you might expect that number of touch points to come down. But we need to understand that we aren't always going to convert a user the first time they see the message. And that doesn't mean that first interaction was a waste either. It's all about moving them along that journey towards becoming a converted prospect. And finally, as I mentioned previously, this sort of approach to marketing allows you not only to test new styles of marketing that you might not have used before, but also to try forms of marketing you've attempted in the past but in a new way. It can then become a test. You can test channels and approaches that might inform the rest of your wider marketing strategy, or show ways in which you might be able to improve existing campaigns that you thought were already doing as well as they could. So let's recap what we've talked about on the topic of promotion. So once again, it's vital that we look at our research when it comes to promotion. There's going to be costs associated with promoting our content. So again, we want to be basing our decisions on data, and we want to lessen that risk of following a sort of biased opinion. If you're running digital marketing campaigns, then look to get insight from these as well. If you layer that in with the research I just mentioned, then you can get to a really good position where you're coming from a really well-informed position to create your approach. Channels that have underperformed in the past aren't necessarily worthless to your business. Content marketing offers a softer sell, which means you can succeed in areas you might not be able to succeed before. We also looked at opportunities where content is the ad, an interesting proposition when you create a piece of content that you've put a lot of research into and you're really proud of. Finally, I talked about multi-channel campaigns, something I'll be looking at more later on. So you've done the research, you've created and implemented the content, and you've gone on to promote it, and now your campaign's done. So what happens now? So content strategy doesn't end when your first campaign finishes. In this section, I'm going to talk about what to do when the campaign ends and what it can do to help you in the future, both in your future content marketing and in your digital marketing strategy as a whole. So whether you've been promoting a single piece of content or you've been doing a multi-channel campaign, a comprehensive breakdown of what happened is a vital piece of work. To give context to the kind of insight you could look to acquire, I'm going to give an example case. So in this case, I'm talking about analysis after a lead generation campaign, whereby we're driving traffic to a landing page where the prospect will then need to complete a form. They give us their data, and in exchange, we give them our content. In this situation, here's what I'd want to look at after the campaign. So I'd want to look at how each marketing channel, whether that's one or many, has performed. So I want to look at reach, click-through rate, conversion rate, cost per conversion. This gives me that kind of hard data about how the channels have performed that's going to allow me to make an assessment later on down the line. I want to look at how the landing page performed. How many people viewed the landing page? What percentage of them went on to consume the content? For those people that didn't convert, what caused them to drop out? This is where heat mapping and click mapping come in handy. It gives you a really clear indication of what it was about your landing page that wasn't up to scratch. And finally, there's post-campaign considerations. What happened to the leads we captured? How many of them were followed up? How did they perform? Have they been converting into sales? And how did the sales team find that conversation? As I mentioned before, we can try and answer the questions that the sales team always run into. So did having that information help them make that first contact? Was that first conversation easier? So we've learned a lot about our campaign from all that data. So what do we do with that information? So as I said at the start of this section, developing a content strategy isn't a one and done kind of thing. Once your first campaign is wrapped, it's time to learn and begin planning again. So from the previous example, this means learning about the channels we used. Would we use these channels again for future campaigns? Were there channels that perform really well and would actually benefit from more budget? Are there channels that delivered plenty of traffic but not a high conversion rate, or vice versa? Another consideration, do you run these channels for other kinds of activity? How do they perform for your content campaign compared to how they perform normally? Once you've analysed this information, we can change and improve our promotion strategy for future campaigns. That could mean scaling up the budget for some channels, it could mean removing others, and it could mean changing the approach on one social network to match another. It's quite hard to give generalizations in this case because it will change from campaign to campaign. But the important idea here is that you look and learn and adapt based on the data that you're getting. So next, let's look at the landing page. How did it perform? What story are your heat maps telling you? Are there improvements we can make to future landing pages based on what we're seeing? After all, if more people convert, that's more people consuming the content, and in the example case, more leads. Finally, how was that content received? Did it lead to sales? As I mentioned before, when those leads were followed up on, how did the customers respond? Had they actually read the content? Did they find it helpful? Now all of this is an important part of wrap-up and help you to optimize your strategy for next time. However, we'd advise doing as much of this as possible during the campaign. If you can see a channel's floundering or failing, or that another channel will perform better with more budget, you don't need to wait for the campaign to end to make the change. You can optimize as you go, always be on the lookout for improvements. The changes you make can then lead into your wrap-up. Which changes helped, which changes didn't. Are there changes you made that you'd pull through to your next campaign? And if changes have failed, then you've learned not to do them next time. So we offer content marketing as a service, and we've run some extremely successful campaigns for clients with concepts running from guides to content hubs, videos, and more. It's also actually how we market ourselves. So in this section, I'm going to talk through our approach to content marketing to kind of give you an idea of how we bring it all together and to do, research, production, implementation, promotion, and wrap-up, and how that comes together to form a successful campaign. So here's how we would structure a content marketing campaign in terms of timeline. And here it's split into three sections: strategy and planning, execution, and reporting. So we would start strategy and planning with a kick-off meeting. This is where we're looking to establish things like objectives, budgets, responsibilities, and so on. We then move on to research. We're looking to get that all-important user research, user insight, as I mentioned so many times before, as well as performing stakeholder interviews and digging into the data we can pull from the existing site. Once we've done that research, we'd want to proceed on to a workshop. This is where we go through our research with the client. This is where we start presenting ideas for topic, strategy, promotion, etc. In our opinion, this kind of thing should be a collaborative session. We're looking for client input. We want to make sure that what we're planning makes sense for the business and is in line with their tone of voice and existing brand image. Next, we get to planning. This means working out a go-live date, and based on that, working out when assets are going to be produced. As I said before, content is time-consuming, so making sure you have enough time to produce that content is obviously important. This is also when it's time to look at how you're going to split your budget across multiple channels, which channels you're going to use, and if you can do anything else like native content, video display, these other kinds of content-heavy promotion. So once you have all that in place, it's time to move on to execution. But I'm going to park that for a second because I'm going to talk about execution independently to the rest of this. So then, once we've done the execution section, which I'll talk about in a moment, you need to move on to reporting. So at Coast Digital, we think it's really important to provide relevant and accurate results for all marketing activity, and content marketing is no different. Having this kind of post-campaign insight allows you to do the kind of wrap-up activity I was talking about earlier. It allows you to learn for your next campaign. Once you know what does and doesn't work, that becomes part of the research process for the next cycle. So let's go back to execution. This is where we see sort of an example of what a multi-channel campaign looks like from my perspective. Now, there's some example channels here, but a campaign might not use all of these channels, or it might well use all of these and more. It's all about tailoring the channels you use to the target audience. There's things that we haven't included here. You could be including those content-heavy promotion methods that I mentioned before, like native content or Facebook Canvas. And there's other options as well. There's YouTube pre-roll. There's so many marketing channels available now. It's really about finding an approach that fits your target audience. And the important thing here is that we're driving all that traffic to one place, one landing page. And our method is generally to place the content behind a form. This requires the user to fill in their details and then they receive the content. So again, this puts the emphasis on quality. If you're going to give me your information and I'm going to give you content in return, if you receive a substandard piece of content, you're not going to be particularly happy about it. Nope, sorry, I skipped a slide. So there we are. Sorry about this. So the kind of really important thing about having a landing page, which is central to the campaign, is it gives us a couple of really significant advantages. The first thing is it allows us to accurately track how the campaign's performing, both from an overall perspective and from a channel-specific perspective. Again, this allows us to optimize and streamline for future campaigns, as well as making on-the-fly kind of ongoing improvements to the campaign we're currently running. And secondly, it allows us to really heavily optimize that page through heat mapping, click mapping, and kind of doing ongoing conversion rate optimization within the campaign. And once the prospect completes that form and they've given us their details, that's a captured lead. And better still, we know that they're interested in the topic that that content campaign was based around, which, as I said before, makes that first sales interaction that much easier because you already have something to talk about. So I'm going to move on to a slide you've already seen. So, if you have any questions about any of the elements covered in this webinar, if you need help with research, creation, or promotion, if you're looking to create your own content marketing campaign, then we'd love to talk to you about it. You also might want to download the Essential Guide to Content Marketing from our website, which is full of great ways to get your content marketing off the ground. So now we're going to move on to the Q&A. So if you have any questions on anything I've covered so far, there is an option to submit that through the client. So if you submit a question, I'll take a look at it and I'll give you some answers in a minute. Okay, I've got some really good questions come in, so I'm just going to tackle a couple of those and then we'll wrap up. Okay, so the first one I've got is from Laura. So she said, you focused on content marketing for lead generation, but my current aim is to grow brand awareness. Are there any content strategies that could help? So, a lot of what I did talk about was based around lead generation, but you can generally apply the same kind of strategies for brand awareness. You just don't put that kind of lead capture mechanism in the middle. You may want to look at more kind of impression-heavy promotion methods like programmatic display or native content, things that are going to put the content in front of your customer as quickly as possible. And you may want to include a lead generation mechanism as well. You don't necessarily have to split those two approaches. They can kind of work together. So yeah, I would recommend some very impression-heavy approach. Native content, I think, is a really good way of doing brand awareness through content marketing. Just reading a question, bear with me. Okay, so we've got a question. Can you advise how to find out what search terms people are using to land on your website? Google Analytics has stopped using this feature, and I wondered if you had any recommendations for this on other sites. So yeah, we've noticed the same kind of things with Google Analytics. Actually, Google AdWords is a really good way of getting that data. The keyword planner in AdWords is a really good way of still getting to that kind of information. There are other tools you can use, like SEMrush, for example, has got some really good tools for getting that kind of keyword data. Just finding another question. Okay, so a question here. My product is really reliant on third-party sales channels, so we don't own the customer relationship. Any general tips about what to do to reach the right people with our messaging? Well, in that kind of situation, I think one important thing to consider is what those third-party channels are doing from a content perspective. Are they doing anything with messaging? Are they already going out? You know, are there areas you can look at? Are there areas they're not covering, or are there areas they're covering badly? Or things you could look to improve upon where you feel like they haven't necessarily represented you accurately? You know, when you don't necessarily have full control over the kind of content that's being produced around your product, I think it's really important to look at what's already out there, because there may be things that you feel you need to respond to, you feel you need to correct, or you feel you need to emphasize. So that's kind of what I'd recommend as a first step in that. It's quite a complicated issue. I will actually answer all of these questions by email after the session, so I may be able to give you a more detailed breakdown of how I deal with that. And I've got one final one I've got time to answer, which is how could we repurpose existing content from a Gemma? I think that's an interesting point. I think repurposing content is really important. You know, I've talked a lot about how time-consuming content can be and how difficult it can be. You know, when you've already put that time in, you've put the effort in, you know, you've done the research, you've done the production. I think the last thing you want to do is put that content to one side and go, okay, we've done that now, and then not use it again. So there's lots of ways to repurpose content. You know, we've already talked about the difference between lead generation and brand awareness. And once your lead generation campaign wraps, you know, give it a month, and then you could put that content up on your website to be freely accessed, and then you could drive more traffic to it as a brand awareness exercise. So, you know, one way to do it is, yeah, just to retweak that objective and retweak that approach based on that. Another thing is, if the information is good and you're proud of it, you know, you can take a text document and turn that into a video. You know, you can take the same information and repurpose it into a different medium. That gives you a whole new piece of content that you can promote in a whole new way. So I'd just like to say thanks everyone for your time, and thanks for all your questions. There's absolutely loads pouring in. So we will get back to all of you. I'll write up emails, and you'll hear from us very soon. So thanks for your time. Yeah, speak to you soon. Cheers.